Good morning, everyone. Okay, I say good morning because I look like it's a good morning, and it feels like it's a good morning, but it is almost 1 o'clock. I wanted to go over all the books I read in December. It's the 30th. I do have one more day technically, but we've got stuff planned for tomorrow. So I'm just gonna wrap it up here. I don't think I'm gonna be able to finish a book today. I'm taking a little bit of like a day or two reading break because I just tried to pick up Dream Hunter by Elizabeth Knox, and I read the first 4 lines like 6 times and I still could not comprehend the information on the page. So that's fun. Hate that, but I think my brain is telling me it needs a minute to just chill. So I think I'm gonna play Sims and don't start for the next couple of days and just relax and then pick up the next couple of books. I'm gonna go over all of the books that I read in December. I'm gonna do my best to do a no spoiler situation, and I'm gonna let you know what I rated out of Goodreads is 5 stars. I figured that's pretty solid. That's how most people I watch on BookTube do it, so why not? Alright, so the first book I read in December, it took me forever to get through this book. It took me so long. I read Dracula by Bram Stoker. I read the Norton Critical Edition. I read all of the critiques, adaptations, and history stuff that's in the last 160 pages of the book. And that kind of made more sense when I read this book. I think I would rate, I can't remember what I put this on Goodreads as, but I think I rated it about a 3 or 4 out of 5 stars. Because although this book is very slow going, it's like any classic that I've read. I haven't read a lot of classics. I'm not a classics buff. I just read stuff that sounds cool. From the last classic that I read was Jane Eyre, and although both of these books were kind of interesting, you could definitely see in the time period that these books were written that what we say in a sentence, it takes them 4 sentences to say it, right? There is actually a line in this book, I can't remember what page it's on, but it also calls a sentence kind of a puddle situation because it doesn't make much sense. So in this book, it recognizes that some of its stuff that it says is pretty wild. And overall, I enjoyed it enough to finish it, but I also power through books because I have this weird thing about not finishing books. I've got a book on my currently reading shelf in the Goodreads that I have not touched for over a year, but I refuse to DNF it because eventually I'll get through it. At first when I read this book, I'm not gonna lie, I thought it sucked. I was like, okay, this is boring. They keep repeating themselves. You know, they keep treating the women in this book, which they have a lot of footnotes, which help make things make a lot of sense. But I was like, oh, it doesn't make a ton of sense, and I don't really get it. And also, it's a little frustrating. And the ending, I'm not gonna tell you what it is, but for me personally, it was disappointing. If you see a cat butt, one of my cats is sitting butt next to my phone, so it's cool. Personally, this book, I thought it was really boring until I read the ending, the last 160 pages of the info and the adaptations and stuff. It made a lot of sense, and I had to keep in mind that this is the time period. This was just a big part of the time period, the way they treated women. They were surprisingly super respectful, but I could definitely say they were like, she can't take care of herself type vibes. Annoying. I thought the dynamics were really interesting. Also, in the very beginning, in the preface, it literally brings up Anne Rice's Interview with the Vampire as a homoerotic adaptation. And through this whole book, I was reading it and I was like, I need that homoerotic energy. I need to read it. Oh, fuck. We're back on track, besties. We're back on track. We're good. I guess the bullet points I would take away from this book is it was okay. The ending was fucking disappointing, but I kind of get why. And the book overall was fairly drawn out, and the way they treat women was not gross and horrible, but definitely annoying as fuck. If you go into it knowing that there's homoerotic tendencies in this book, it makes a lot more sense. At the very ending, like in all of the information, there is a homoerotic history of Dracula, and I was looking forward to reading that. So of course, instead of just skipping to it, I read every single bit before that. When I put this book down, I completely sponged it from my memory for the most part, because I was like, I just need to read something refreshing that I'm going to be able to blast through, because the surface value of it is not that interesting, in my opinion. Reading about how at the time, this was like really scary when they had movie adaptations, how it was like horror scary. I did not feel scared one moment in this book, okay? No moment was I reading this book in fear, quivering in fear and anxiety. And it could just be it's a classic and everybody knows Dracula, but I've not seen any of the adaptations except for Renfield. I don't even consider that to be an adaptation of Dracula. I think that is an adaptation of Renfield's character from Dracula. And that's the only one I've seen. And I went into this knowing almost nothing about the characters other than knowing that like the obvious things. It's been around long enough, everybody kind of knows. But the next 5 books, I read 6 books this month. The next 5 books are all 5 stars for me, and we're gonna go over why. The next book I read, I slammed through this in like 3 days. This is I'll Give You the Sun by Jandy Nelson. Let me tell you something. Jandy Nelson, my favorite author of all time. I have read both of her books. Noah and Jude are twins, and the story is in their perspective. It's a dual perspective book that switches through chapters. Noah's perspective is when they're between 13 and 14 years old, and then when it swaps perspectives, Jude's perspective is when they're 16 years old. Now, this book is a whirlwind. I'm very defensive of books that I rate 5 stars. Books that personally have changed my life, I say in a cheesy way, that have helped me view the world differently in a more beautiful way, and have also helped me learn something about people, right? When I read this book for the first time, I believe I was in 8th grade, and I remember this being one of the first books I've ever read about a gay person, about a gay teenage boy, and I just found it to be so beautiful. It's a book that represents gay people. I believe, okay, listen, as a person who is in the LGBT community but in a straight passing relationship, it's like a little bit different for me, but hopefully I express this in a way that's respectful. So I have a brother who is gay, or at the time he identified as gay. I don't know exactly if he puts a label on himself now, whatever, not the point. But I remember when people at school found out he was gay, that they called him, I'm not going to share his name, gay, whatever his first name is, and he did not like that, because that's all people saw him as, was that he was a gay boy, a gay teenage boy, and he had a gift of art, just like Noah in this book. Noah has a gift for art, for illustration. My brother has the same, and my brother is also very smart. He's extremely intelligent, and I know that it bothered him to be looked at as just a gay person and not as a whole person. In this book, the story of the gay relationship is part of the plot, is not even the most important part of the book. It is a large portion, but you also see Noah being a whole person, and it feels like the bare minimum, right? But personally, when I've talked to people, especially as a teenager, they definitely treat gay people as if that's all they are, and that they're not any other important, there aren't any other important parts of them, and that's so surface level and so false. And there's so many deep and beautiful things about every human being, in this book just really solidified that and really put that in my head growing up. Because listen, I'm in the Midwest. If you know, you know. I live in the Bible Belt, okay? If you know, you know. And I loved reading this book. It's just a beautiful journey of LGBT experience in teenagehood. It is a story that involves loss. It involves broken relationships. It covers what it's like to be a young girl dealing with issues on her value because of the value that the people around her put on her based on her own choices, because she's a growing individual. And the book comes together so well in the end. I read this book all the time, and I'm so glad I got my hands on it, and I got it for a very cheap price, which I was so thankful for. The writing style, if you're not into metaphors and artsy talk, and it is very much like, in the best way possible, in my opinion, Manic Pixie Dream Girl type vibes, the way that they speak to each other. It's giving artsy fartsy teenagers that see the world as art, and it is so beautiful. And it's not for everyone. Listen, I'm so defensive over this book. I read the Goodreads comments, and some people, if you don't get it, you don't get it. And I've come to terms with that. I refuse to fight with people on the internet about opinions that I can't change. And so this is one of those books where if you are into that, read it. If you are not, maybe still read it, because to me personally it's extremely important. But if you don't like it, that's okay. If you don't want to read it, don't do it. I love this book so much, so deeply, with my whole soul. And I could talk about it for hours. And if you want like a full deep dive on this book from me, Bessie, I will have a wall of photos, and I will have the little, like, someone tracking a murder mystery with the red string. Yeah, me and you together doing that, I would love to. Let me know. All right, the next book, The Sky is Everywhere, also by Jandy Nelson. This is so good. This is also a 5 out of 5 stars. This story follows this girl who has just recently lost her sister due to, I believe it's like a heart arrhythmia? Question mark? I've read this book 4 times too, still can't remember. It's a story about this girl navigating loss. The loss of her literal closest best friend ever, her sister, her older sister. This girl discovering like how to handle grief, because grief is so complex. Grief is deeply complicated. Not only is it just this deep sense of sadness, and I've heard grief is described as love with nowhere to go. Love that you can't place with that person anymore. She goes through this grief, but with this grief comes guilt anytime she feels any sort of happiness or feels any sort of peace. She is navigating that, and she's navigating this with her family, or not, the parts of it where she's completely avoidant, this like needing to share and also not wanting to say a word about it because it hurts too fucking bad to do it. A theme in this book that you'll notice right off the bat in every single chapter, I believe at the beginning and end of most, if not all chapters, is a little like snippet of a conversation or a poem or just some sort of thought written down on a random piece of paper trash that this character lets just kind of blow in the wind. And the love interest, there is a love interest in this book. This book does have a love interest plot, which again, like the other book, is not the main part of the story. It's a big part, but it is not the main part of the story. It is just beautiful to see how people handle being hurt by another person. I feel like we don't know how we react until it happens to us, and that is something that this book kind of covers, is that grief and love are so deeply complicated and complex, and we make shitty choices because sometimes we act like shitty people. Sometimes we fuck up, we make mistakes, we mess up, we try again, and we ask for forgiveness. We don't always get forgiveness from the people we hurt, but we have to forgive ourselves at some point so we don't live our lives in a constant stressed out guilt. We have to, and not only forgive ourselves, but change from that and understand what we did was wrong, hold ourselves accountable, because if anyone's going to give us grace, it has to be us, right? And I'm a big believer in that, because as a person who makes mistakes all the time, who says the wrong thing, who is just human like everybody else, sometimes we get this expectation that we have to be perfect, and if we're not, then we are horrible, bad people. I think that this is a beautiful representation of especially a teenager. I believe she's 16 in this book. teenager dealing with all of these complicated feelings and growing from that, this book is just very beautiful. It's a very beautiful read. J.D. Nelson is so good at being so deeply profound. The way her comparisons and her descriptions are so deeply profound, while also being able to create characters that are complex and not always good and right, but that in the end somehow find a way to get through that. And I can't get too deep into it or I'll start spoiling it. This is another book I could do a deep dive on. I read Ishmael by Daniel Quinn. So this is a book actually that was, I borrowed this from my brother and sister-in-law. They recommended it to me, and I have a lot of feelings about this book, and they're all positive. This is a 5-star read. A lot of my feelings are from reading the Goodreads reviews. There are some people that get it, and then there are some people that don't, and that is okay. And if you read it and you didn't like it, maybe try rereading it. I know that not everything is accurate and perfect in this book because we're all human and we all, are just trying to navigate. But maybe reread it before leaving a bad review. And with a more open mind, because the world is, the human race is so deeply complex, and that we are so set into what our world is now in this sense of consumerism and capitalism, and I won't get too deep into it because we're not about to fight, right? This is just my lived experience of being a person in the world. We are so deeply entrenched in consumerism and capitalism and this constant industrialization of the world. The premise of the book is basically this. There's an ad in the paper. This book came out in the 90s, early 90s. So there was an ad in the paper, and the main character, who I don't think is ever actually named, which I think is kind of neat. If they are and I just missed it, beats me. And he pulls this ad and he goes to meet this teacher. It's basically, I'll read the back. It says, "Teacher seeks pupil, must have an earnest desire to save the world, apply in person." And it had an address on it. So this character goes to this address. And he walks into this room, and I think there's like a bookshelf in the corner. There's a window on the far end, and then a chair in the middle of the room facing a window that goes to another room. He looks over and sees a gorilla in this room. Sees a poster on the back wall. The poster on the back wall says, "With man gone, will there be hope for gorilla?" And you don't know exactly what that would mean until the very end of the book, right? Whenever he sits down in this chair, he makes eye contact with this gorilla, and then I guess gets telepathically communicates with him, something like that. You learn about the gorilla, how he got here, the information he's gathered, and also why he wants to teach a person. And this book goes over the state of our planet, how humans came to be this way, where we came from, for the most part. I will say, reading this book, there are certain parts of it that remind you it's a fiction story, because it really just sounds like a conversation between two podcasters a lot of the time. The thing about this book is it really goes into why humans believe the world was created for them, why we believe the world was created for us, and how that has led to the destruction of other species and a lot of our nature. It goes over how we are quote quote civilized, and how animals and a lot of native tribes peoples are considered primitive, and what the difference is. It reconstructs a couple of biblical stories. This teacher forces this character to think, and you realize throughout the book that this character has a hard time thinking for himself. And I don't know if it really goes into why, but I have a couple of theories as to why. But I think it's important that the teacher's a gorilla, because it's between these characters of a person who lives and breathes the modern world. And I think I think this also has a big American-centric view of the world, because I believe the character lives in New York. And then the teacher is the life form that modern day people would consider to be a lower life form, that doesn't have a lot of intelligence, that is lower than we are, when in reality we have a lot to learn from this character. This whole story is mixed between becoming hopeful and hopeless, and understanding and not understanding. There are some things in this book I still don't get, I'm still not quite sure what they were talking about. I'm not a researcher. I do my own research as I can, but I'm not a researcher. I don't know a ton about Native peoples. I don't know a ton about what is really truly moment by moment happening to our planet because of what we're doing. I don't know like how well the processes that we've tried to put in place as people to be better to the planet are actually working. I just know that for a lot of people, it's this deep set sense of doom, and I think that this book helps to feed that sense of doom and also alleviate it a little bit, in my opinion. So I recommend this book. It is a trilogy. I ordered the second book from Thrift Books, and I can't wait to read it. I believe the next story is about religious deconstruction, which is something I'm struggling with right now, something that I know a lot of people struggle with right now, and something that a lot of people just struggle with in general, and I'm really looking forward to see what that has to offer. It sounds like it's going to be a really wonderful time, but this book was definitely 5 out of 5, and I've been telling everybody about it. This is just like, as a person who's 23 years old, who's not fully college educated, who has a deep feelings for the state of our planet and who we are and who we're becoming as humans and how we treat each other and how we view other life forms. We take this beautiful, living, breathing planet for granted. Reading it in this perspective that I have, this was a really eye-opening story. It did confirm a lot of things for me, but it also really opened my mind to a lot of stuff. And I know there are people who are going to read it that are like, this is old news. This is old news. We've been new. Duh, you know, it's a book that I was really, really grateful to have been recommended and to be allowed to borrow. I've been thinking about it for like a whole week now. Like, what can we do, right? If you read it, you know. If you haven't, please read it. It is so good. And if you don't like it, cool. If you do like it, cool. I hope that no matter what perspective you read it in, you get something from it. All right, I'm just gonna go through the next 2 books really quick. Let me say something to you guys. I like boy love manga. Okay, got that out of the way. If you're not into it, don't worry about it. You don't have to be. I won't talk about it too much unless you want me to. Then tell me, and we'll get into it. It's very niche, like so niche that this particular manga has only been read by around 4,000 or 5,000 people at the most. These other books have over 100,000 reviews on them for the most part. So it's very niche. I understand that, and I understand it's not for everybody. But if you like it, I'll talk about it more. Both of these are 5 stars because I just like this. I like the tropes that they were. So I read Therapy Game 1 and 2 by Meguru Hinohara. I probably said that wrong. I'm so sorry. I would love to know how to say it correctly. This is Minato. He is a gay man. Parties at the bar with some ladies. And then this is Shizuma, and he just recently got dumped from a girlfriend that cheated on him. These two end up hooking up. It's like the first thing that happens in this story. Don't worry, it's not a spoiler. Listen, I don't think it's right and correct just because it happened and I read about it. Okay, cool, thank you. And they wake up the next day and they're not like freaked out about it at all, so that's really relieving. But this character is like, doesn't remember what happened. He's like, just like, I didn't know I liked men like that? Question mark? But he's like, but okay, I guess I'm bisexual, lol. And this Minato goes through was like, you mean you don't remember anything? You don't remember what you did to me? And then he proceeds to like take his choker off and tie the hands of this other guy and is like, how about I show you and remind you? And he's something in BL manga that isn't a fully explored thing that needs to be, but that was fortunately explored in this book, is expressed consent or expressed non-consent. This character goes, no, I said no, and then they stop. And I just thought that was great. Unfortunately, in this type of story, blatantly expressed consent is not always a super popular part of the story, which is really sad. And the express consent didn't change the story at all. I know that sometimes the trope is, like, there's one that I read, it's the world's greatest first love. Storyline of that one is basically these characters were together, had a falling out, separated for 10 years, ended up working together on accident. And one character is trying to get the other character to fall back in love with him, which is a great concept, right? It's a great story, and I want to read it till it's finished. But it took a very long time for the character that is trying to convince the other one to love him that maybe I am being rough and harsh and not keeping his wants and needs in mind. And they tend to have a lot of, like, spicy scenes where the character is like, I don't want to, like, is like, no, stop, but, like, they keep going, and it freaks the other character out, but this character keeps going back to him, and it's and I don't mean that in like a, why does he keep going back to him? Well, people in relationships that are abusive, they tend to go back for reasons that I may not know, but from what I understand, a lot of it is familiarity. It's their comfort. It's what they know. And I think in this story, the most recent volume that I've read, the ending of it, the main character is in the perspective of the guy who's can't decide if he's in love with this guy or not. And I think the other character is starting to, at the end of that book, was starting to realize, like, oh, I fucked up. I've fucked it all up. Back to the main point. In this set of 2 books, I believe it's a duology spinoff from another story. I have them upside down. It's a spinoff from another story, and I haven't read that one yet, but this is the first one I read out of all of the manga that I've read that has expressed blatant consent and non-consent. Sometimes it's not super clear whether or not the character says yes, but the general premise is like, my husband always knows that I'm down, right? And when these two are together, it is like the way that they act around each other, the way that they treat each other, the way that they speak to each other, it is expressed that they are down almost all the time, right? Unless they say no. And that is, I think, a really great step in the right direction. So if you read anything like this, let me know. Let me know in the comments. But I know this is an extremely niche genre that I've only really talked to either like other gay men or fangirling women like me are into. So let me know if you're into that, and maybe we could talk more about it. I do read these all the time if I can afford them. So I'm happy to talk about them. They'll be in a lot of my reviews. So, but I will also keep you guys updated on the stories I read and if they get any better with consent. I look at the world in an American-centric view. I totally get that, and I totally understand that, and I'm learning. So please bear with me. But if I'm not mistaken, and it could be just the time period that some of these were written in, like the early 2010s, and then this one was in 2020, that homosexuality is still pretty taboo in Japan, and I know public displays of affection are kind of looked down upon, at least in the time that these were written. And they experience a type of discrimination. This book did a pretty solid job of a lot of stuff. There are also cats and dogs in this book, in these 2 books, which was some of my favorite parts. I love a good cat, dog. I just love animals. And if they're drawings in a book, even if they don't have a lot to do with the plot, I'm down. I'm here for it. So these are the books I read this month. I'm very proud of them. I'm so proud of them. Thank you guys for being here, for listening to me discuss all of these books and get into it about them and hearing me ramble about them. If anything I've said is possibly incorrect, or if you have any like extensions of an opinion or any opposing opinions about this stuff, please don't hesitate to drop it in the comments. I'm a big believer in like kind education. I am trying to get over my fear of mean people on the internet, but I also know that people don't owe me like kind, gentle correction, especially if I should know the info already. But I'm also a big believer in you don't know what you don't know until you know that you don't know it. And if you guys have any opinions or any sort of information you want to share with me about any of these books, topics, whatever, please let me know. I'm just here to get into it. And learn from books, from people, make some besties maybe, and hang out. I hope you guys enjoyed this. Let me know if you read any of these, or what you're reading right now, and how your last month of the year was book-wise. I hope you're doing so good, and that your holidays have been banger. My holidays have been pretty banger, and I hope that you're doing good. Thank you so much. We have a great day.